Jenny and Becky, you guys have to see what it looks like on Memorial Parkway. So pretty.
Yes.
Oh, I can't wait.
I think we're ready. I will now call to order the study session meeting of November 15th, 2021. Members of the public are invited to attend in-person city council meetings in council chambers on the lower level of City Hall. Public access to tonight's meeting is also available on the Local Government Access Channel 8 for Comcast subscribers and on the city's YouTube channel online, and by telephone using the call-in numbers posted on the meeting agenda. Joanna, will you call the roll, please?
Mayor Leidy,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Wolford,
Present.
Councilmember Whitkovich,
Here.
Councilmember Downing will be absent, Councilmember Brown,
Here.
Councilmember Goff,
Here.
Councilmember Duran Malika, Councilmember Lukman Hiramasa,
Okay. We have 2 items on the study session agenda tonight, and we will begin with the Northglenn City Hall project update. Oh, Eric's going to introduce the item. Hello.
Hi, good evening, Mayor and members of council. We've actually got Anderson Masondale Architects here this evening.
Okay.
I do want to thank you all for your time over the last week. I know, scheduling that time's not always easy, but I appreciate your flexibility and being able to come in on that. AMD is going to go ahead and provide you all with a brief presentation this evening to go over kind of what they heard out of all those interviews. And then we'll go for questions after that as well.
Okay, thank you. Welcome.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Mind if I take off my mask? Well, thank you for having us. And thank you all for, my name is Stephen Hall from Anderson Masondale Architects, and it's good to see a lot of familiar faces. As you all know, we spent last week having individual interviews with every council member and mayor, and it was wonderful getting to know you all, getting to know your aspirations. The pulse that you have on your constituents is impressive and really commendable. So today we would like to simply recap and give a summary of the interviews. And there were a number of consensus points. There's just a whole slew of topics that we all, and the interviews were meant to be informal. They were meant to really get to know you, get to understand Northglenn a little better. And with that, does this work? No?
Right there. Oh, is it on? It might not be on.
Oh, boy. There we go.
There we go.
There you go.
Perfect.
Okay, so the interview topics, I think overall, I think we hit on all of these topics with each of you in different orders as our conversations were a little more fluid. But we wanted to go through this summary in the order of these topics to really help identify some consensus points, some points that were recurring themes for everyone, and also be able to end with a bit of a discussion. So the first 5 items there, the Northglenn differentiators through community spaces in the new city hall, are all topics that I'll go through some of the findings. We'll also go through some of the public input that we've gotten from online surveys and from the other public engagement. So to begin with the Northglenn differentiators, just some bullet points, some things that caught our attention, and most of these were not in a vacuum. Multiple council members talked about these items. The accessibility, and these differentiators and identity, they're grouped together both in, I think, how council members see Northglenn today, but also aspirationally, and what this new city hall can be. So these differentiators and identity, I think, are certainly a roadmap. They're things that will continue to guide the development of the design, to understand the city, and to understand the people of Northglenn. So I won't rush through them. Hopefully you can all read them, but and feel free throughout any of this to chime in. You're welcome to stop me, or I can elaborate on any given point. But The first one, I think everyone said, it was maybe the first thing to come out of everyone's mouth about how this building should be accessible and welcoming for the people. I think a civic presence, language was used differently to describe what civic presence means, but I think we know that this is a building 50 to 100 years plus, and so a timeless nature of experience and quality and materiality needs to be expressed. This item came up, putting Northglenn on the map. I think that was phrased a couple different ways by a couple different council members. And I think there's a number of ways to do that, but this city hall is the opportunity to really plant your flag and to do just that. Innovative and forward thinking, I think that can have a broad range. It was as we dive into details, I think what that means and how you push forward thinking will certainly unravel, and we'll pull that thread. The compelling people to come to City Hall. I think that was a really common thread through everyone's interviews. Being able to residents should come to City Hall. They currently come to City Hall simply to pay a bill, go through and get a passport. But what will make City Hall a place where they want to linger, where they want to stay, where they're not just here to conduct business, but they're here to build community. Affordability, I think, has a number of different meanings as well. I think when every council member talked about not just what attracted them to Northglenn, but what makes Northglenn the value that the sense of home, the sense of place, but also a place that is accessible and affordable. I think it builds community in a wonderful way, and I think that was something that was said over and over by each council member. The affinity to a sense of home and open space, I think this is something that each council member identified in a different way, what attracted them to Northglenn, and I think had a really wonderful pulse on their constituents as well. Small but mighty, that was something that I think multiple people said in a different way. And certainly gets into the next 4 bullet points. Unique pride, focus on community, invested and engaged residents group. It's clear through the events and the activities you have throughout the year that people really are engaged. People really feel a sense of ownership and a sense of pride in the city. So that's a recap. Those are some of the things that please.
So
Mary
I
Lane.
don't want to interrupt you
do.
consistently. I'm probably going to just do it after each section
Great.
because I do have 2 hands up already.
Great.
So I'm going to stop after that right there. Mayor Pro Tem Wolford?
My concern and issue had been addressed. Thank
Oh,
you, Madam Mayor.
great. Councilmember Brown?
I just want to remind him that some of us are virtual. And if he gets going too fast, just let us know what page he's on, okay?
Can you
Great.
see the screen?
No, not at all.
So
Oh, okay.
I'm on page 4 currently.
It says page 5 at the
Page 5,
bottom.
right, page 5, differentiators and identity.
Okay, I found that one. It was just a reminder moving forward.
I will.
Okay.
Don't lose me.
Oh, sorry about that. I thought you guys could see. No worries. And I am watching for your hands, and we'll kind of chunk it by section so that we have space for questions along the way.
Great.
Sounds like a
Any other
plan.
questions on that section?
No, ma'am.
Nope. Okay. Thanks.
So on to the next slide, page 6. And just as a benchmarking, this was a question that was posed to the residents through the online survey. And these were some of the results that have come back so far. The survey is still open. People are still welcome to take the survey. So this isn't the end all be all of the data, but it's certainly a snapshot as of today. And it's interesting, the question that was asked is at the top. What adjectives would ideally describe the desired collective experience and identity of a new and improved city hall? And they had a number of boxes they could check. Each word was a different box. So accessible and welcoming was the first checked box. 80% of people who have taken that survey checked that box. And so on and so forth down the line. So the columns on the left, the top 10 are all experiences and identities that I think are consistent with a lot of the interviews and sentiments. I think we can unpack a little bit some of the high tech, what that means, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in terms of council chambers and about hybrid environments, which we are in now. I think that's certainly applicable. But all the way through, I think all of these items on the left column there are aspirational and are things that are reflective of the council interviews. So I think it's good to see there's a lot of overlap in an online survey from the public and council members.
Councilmember Whitcutt?
I'm sorry if you said, but excuse me, how many people responded?
So currently, there are 34 people who have responded, and the survey is still open.
Okay, thank you.
And just to add, we also have the touch base at the grand opening event as well. So a larger number of people, there could be some overlap between those two, but at this point, we don't know.
So on to the next topic. We wanted to dive into the council chambers, the mayor and council spaces. We did spend a lot of time talking about what a council chamber should do, could do, and also what types of spaces the mayor and council needs, from any touchdown space to executive session rooms, to any of those functional aspects that would facilitate the good work that you all do. So on the screen now, where I believe we're on the page that has a diagram that says council chambers, community spaces, and summary. And this is a list, effectively all the spaces that we discussed and that came up in the interviews. So a public lobby, and a public lobby that has an ambassador and a reception, a really identifiable person to link into. A public lobby that has the potential to be an event space in and of itself, pre-function space, art, history, and having those moments be built into the lobby was discussed. We're gonna table on the top right, there's the TBD community function, and we're gonna table that. That's the last bullet point of this, and I know there's a lot of discussion on a couple particular items of potential community spaces and functions, but a community flex room is certainly something that was discussed. And council chambers, the specifics of the council chambers, the height of the dais, the visibility, and a lot of the design aspects, in addition to all the things that make a council chambers run well, including ample storage, being able to reset a room, set up a room for specific needs, AV in a hybrid environment. You cannot overlook the importance of a high-quality AV system, audio-visual. And an executive session room, that was talked about, I think, with every council member, whether that would be something valuable to be able to, instead of clearing the entire chambers for an executive session, you all could go back and have an executive session in a back-of-house area. And then just having things that would serve you well as part of that. I know these council meetings can run long, late into the night, having a restroom that is accessible. Those are just things that make sense, will make your lives a little better. So I can pause here. The last two, sorry, before I pause, the Mayor's Council Work Lounge. I think there are a few different opinions on that, and I think that can be a discussion item. But there was maybe more broad support for having a space, even if it's a small space, for some sort of touchdown, for some sort of professional place to potentially meet constituents, and a place where if you're coming to City Hall 2 or 3, 4 times a week, that you have a place that you can call home. And then a servery, that was part of some of the Timnath and some of the other tours that we had taken, and having a place, a warming kitchen, a catering kitchen are other words for a servery to be able to cater events and cater functions.
Can I clarify that? So we would have a catering kitchen?
So a servery is effectively a place, instead of if you do have a day-long meeting or you have a meeting that goes through the night, being able to have a warm plate of food, being able to, it also will make your flexible community room that much more functional.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the key. I think it's not really tied to the city
Okay.
council chambers, it's more tied to the community room space.
Okay. I was just gonna say, we get by with our nook.
Right, right.
As long as we have like the nook, I think that's all we need. But a catering kitchen is like, whew, and a whole nother step higher.
Bigger coffee machine is what that means.
Thank you. Okay, that's helpful.
Need a cooler back here.
Yeah, there we go.
So that's a great segue, unless there are other questions.
Nope.
To the flexible community room and how it might connect to, so let's set aside for a moment the council chambers and that area and set aside the TBD community function. But a public lobby, these are some of the bullet points, I think, as we started talking about that flexible community space and a public lobby. Again, welcoming and accessible was the consistent refrain. Having a building, an ambassador and reception would go a long way to do that. I think there's not a council member who didn't mention those two things. The security, I thought this was an important one, should feel invisible. Being secure is an imperative, being safe and secure is an imperative, but balancing that appropriately with being a welcoming place was certainly something that came up over and over. We'll see in the next slide, which I haven't gone to yet, but the next slide will go through some of the tours, just a snapshot, just to remind people that there is the ability to separate after hours use of a community room and be able to have the functions of a community room separate from the other spaces of City Hall. So in case a community event went late or after hours, it could be a standalone entry. So that's a bit part of security, but really just a part of the functionality and inviting community into City Hall. Let's see, activity, classes, programs, and purpose that are distinct from the rec center. So the flexible community room is just that, it's meant to be flexible, but I think there was several council members who expressed a desire and recognized that you do have wonderful community spaces brand new in the rec center. And so this exercise and the exercise through programming is really about identifying what might be unique to City Hall, different from the programming that's already occurring in the rec center. Attracting community, so being a vibrant and compelling space, and then specifically about the lobby, this is where the description of event space, pre-function, art, and history, a lobby that is multifaceted, that is unique, in other words, speaks to Northglenn as someone's first experience of entering City Hall, and ideas of rotating art and integrating the history of Northglenn. And we'll table the TBD community space for now. Does anyone have any questions before I move on to the council chambers?
Councilmember Brown?
I don't really have a question.
Oh.
I have a comment. I was one of the ones that was looking for the community room at City Council or at City Hall. And the reason that I had asked, just so everybody knows why I did it, is because when we have those celebrations, like for instance, when we bring in everybody that's elected and, through the new election, and we do those gatherings, I would really like to not be in the hallway. It would be so much nicer if we could have a room. And once we get back into our flow again, it goes down to, we had celebrations in the one room where we eat our dinner sometimes. So that's why I was asking for a community room. My vision was that it would be different from the rec center because it'd be for us to use or anybody else to use during those times where we have cake or we have receptions or anything like that. So I just wanted to tell you why I wanted that.
Thank you. So moving on and to the council chambers themselves and the support spaces around the council chambers. These bullet points are also just a number of the discussion items, and I hope capture the discussions. I think this space in particular, you all spend so much time in the council chambers. You have a really good feel for what works, what doesn't work. And instead of going into what doesn't work here, the summary really talks about aspirations and what should be part of the new council chambers. And so I think a couple of things to note. There was a consistent preference for a fixed dais. We saw in the, and if I go to the next slide, you can see some of the tours we went on. There was, I don't think anyone had a preference at all for Edgewater and in the way that they have a flexible dais. And so that was a consistent refrain. A dais that is modest and approachable in height. I think we saw several different examples. Again, going to the slide that has the tours. Cherry Hills Village had a dais that was 3 steps up. I believe your current dais is 2.5, and Edgewater was almost flush. Platte River had no steps on their board table to the dais, and Timnath just had 1 step, and also had a dais height that was just enough to cover your papers and your desktop, but was not overly tall. And I think there was more consensus on that height and on that being able to strike the balance of approachable, not towering over those in the audience, yet providing good visibility and some semblance of privacy. Let's see, I think good visibility was brought up several times. You know, being able to see your cohort, your counterparts, having good visibility and access to your staff. So I think we saw in Timnath in particular, the staff tables were removed versus Cherry Hills where they were tucked up and quite a bit lower than the dais. And so visibility to Heather and Corey and Joanna would be potentially hindered in a situation like Cherry Hills. And that was their own critique that they brought up as well. Let's see, I think the high quality hybrid environment, so an audio-visual system that is supported and optimized for a hybrid environment is important. The one that I think is important, even though Timnath overall probably took the cake from a precedent standpoint, a couple council members brought up how they really appreciated the daylight and views of Platte River Power Authority and Cherry Hills Village, both which have views into nice outdoor settings, a patio or some other outdoor setting. And the amount of time you all spend here, absolutely. That's so let's see, comfortable chairs. I think everyone mentioned that for the audience. So everyone is in the audience now. Let's see, in terms of security, having a second exit that's easily accessible, probably would connect to any back of house space, any executive session space. Simply having a second way out for council. Again, a very simple and something we can embed into the architecture without calling any attention to security. Similarly, ballistic panels within the dais, just hidden behind the millwork. So those are, I think that recaps it. I'll pause there.
Yeah, Councilmember Duran Malika?
Yeah, so one thing I was gonna bring up, just because I didn't really think about it at the time, but looking at the pictures that you have on the screen here, just looking at the formation of the dais and how it arranged, one thing I really appreciate is our structure that we have here. And one of the reasons why I like that is because I could see Heather and Corey and Joanne. Well, I can't see Joanna because she's behind her screen. But when she pokes her head up, then yes, I could see her. But seeing kind of like their body language as well really helps me. And so being, I don't know, in the line sight. Yes, Corey, we love you that much. No. But being in like the line sight, I think really just kind of helps with the communication because I feel like we're just kind of talking across the room. I don't know. I really love being able to see them. And some of these other ones, staff would be like down there and on the side. And I think that, I don't know how I feel about that. So it just doesn't, I like the connection that we can make right here by looking across the room from each other. And so that was just a new point that I was just noticing with these formations, and I'm a little worried about some of the other ones. I don't want, Heather to be over on the side of on the side of me when I need to be able to see her. when she's answering questions or explaining.
Understood.
And I'll just interject if I may, real quickly. I have similar feelings about that, and in particular, when we went to Edgewater and they first shared with us that the manager and the attorney sat on the dais, I don't like that at all. Because like you shared, Councilmember Duran Moloka, I like to be able to see your eyes, your faces, and have it be more conversational in that regard. Then I definitely don't want us up on the dais like some cities. And Timnath had it structured in a way a bit further away, and then Cherry Hills Village, if I was in one of those chairs in Cherry Hills Village, because I'm shorter, you probably
Yeah.
wouldn't be able to see anything
I
but
know,
the
that's
top
what
of
I'm
my
worried about.
head, so, yeah.
I like this U that we have going on here. The only thing it does get kind of difficult sometimes is seeing other council members. I think, depending on what perspective you're in, I don't know about Meredith, but from my perspective, sometimes I can't really see Becky. So, I mean, that may or may not be a hindrance, but I do like this U situation.
Councilmember Lukman Hiramasa?
Thank you, Mayor. So I do echo a lot of the same sentiments, but I do have a question. My understanding, my favorite layout was Timnath, but my understanding was those tables that we can see where, city manager and the city attorney would sit and move as well, right? Is that correct? That's correct. Okay. So there is some option to maybe angle them so that we can see them a little better.
Yes.
I am not so much a fan of this layout. I kind of am and not at the same time, only because for me, if I want to turn and see, folks that are here visiting from the community, I have to be doing this or turning. So I think that the layout that Timnath has is kind of a U, but not such a big U. It's more of a little baby crescent. So I liked that idea where it was still kind of a U and you could see other people, but still pretty much face community as well. You make more eye contact.
We're gonna have to spread it out. It doesn't look like there's
Yeah.
many people in Timnath.
I know.
That's true.
Five.
The back part is pretty deep though.
Okay, well.
Thank you.
I think, Heather, remind me of the agenda here. I would want to make sure we are on time or close to it.
Oh, you're fine.
Okay.
Keep going.
Keep going, okay.
Yeah.
So the next points, I don't mean to cut anyone off. If
No,
there
we were
other
good. I double
comments?
checked.
Okay, great, thank you. So safe, secure, and welcoming, I think those 3 points were made. And being able to have a security, as I mentioned before, is an imperative, trying to make it relatively invisible. No magnetometers. I think we saw in Timnath, they had pushed up a magnetometer, and admittedly, that city council chambers is also used as a courtroom, so they have it for those purposes. This will not be the case here. The ballistic rated paneling within the dais. Let's see, the discrete under-counter duress buttons were discussed by a council member. Multiple exits and escape routes in the council chambers, I think, were brought up by 2 or 3. And then supporting public space that has a separate entrance. I think that was important in Timnath. Timnath's, it connected seamlessly to the lobby, but simply after hours, those doors were on a timer and would close. So during business hours, it all felt like one seamless public experience, but the entryway into the council functions, the staff council, city areas were then closed after hours. And I think those were the summary of the points of security.
We're good?
Sustainability. So I think that it was a unanimous support to pursue sustainable actions. I think everyone had a list. The list below there were mentioned specifically by council members. Natural daylight, energy efficiency, optimizing water use, being water wise, an all-electric building, I think was mentioned by most council members as something to pursue or to at least explore. Electrical vehicle charging ports, photovoltaics, and I think numerous council members brought up that sustainability, yes, it's a go, but staying within budget, staying within reason, making smart and logical choices was brought up by some council members. And I think these last two were just anecdotal and a statement that by a council member or two that the new city hall should be an example in terms of sustainability, and that the need for a clear strategy and message aligning with your mission statement and your values as a city already. So those were the supported sentiments, and we can get to some of the discussion items next, but wanted to pause there. Is there any? Okay. So the two discussion items that came up were the idea of net zero and certifications. And tonight, the plan is not to dive deep and give you the necessary data to make a decision that, yes, we want to pursue this or no, but just simply laying the groundwork. And we can come back at a later time and really give a deep dive on what that means for your budget, what that might mean for just the project in general. So just to level set expectations, the goal is not to make a decision on net zero or any sort of certification process
Very
today.
smart, thank you.
So first, what is net zero? I think it's important that everyone's on the same page and define that. That was a term discussed and brought up in a couple different interviews. And it's actually one of the more simple ideas of sustainability to get your head around. It is you are producing as much energy as you are consuming. And that, so that your energy is offset by what you produce, hence you are at a net zero. And so how does this happen in architecture or in building? You create a building that is incredibly efficient. You super insulate the walls and the roof. You optimize the building orientation for daylight and energy performance. And that drives down your consumption as much as you can. And every building is going to use some energy, even with every strategy under the moon, you're going to use energy. And so you purchase photovoltaics to offset that amount. And it's a simple message. It's a simple message to get your arms around. It's a simple message to communicate, and which I think has a lot of value. The thing that I think we'd like to explore with you in more detail is there is a premium to it. And there is a premium to there's two factors that you have to take into and we'll explore with you. One is the construction cost. So when you're buying a more expensive envelope, as we say, you're buying more insulation and you're buying a wall assembly that allows you to, so you have to account for that. There are other elements such as electrifying a building. There are some mechanical costs to doing that. And you'll have to buy a mechanical system that that performs at a higher rate. And so there is a cost there. And from our past experience, we've seen costs in that premium range in the 7% to 12% range for a premium for that. And that's the construction cost side. So that would be on the orange dot. You're optimizing your building and you're optimizing your mechanical systems. And so there's a cost premium to that. On the other side, you also have to purchase photovoltaics. And there are benchmarks. You have photovoltaics on your rec center. So that one is in some ways easier to get our heads around once we have a better size of the building, and we'll be able to have a profile and understand generally what the energy use of your building. And so we'll be able to have a bit more of a concrete number on that. But that also will be a premium of cost. So I'll pause there and if anyone has any comments or questions.
Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem Wolford.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm actually really excited about this slide, which I'm sure is not a surprise to anybody on council. But what I think is really cool is that even with some of these upfront costs, I think that we're going to see some cost savings down the line that's going to absolutely make this worth it in the long run, especially when we start especially on the electrification front, while other communities are going through the cost of retrofitting their buildings to make them all electric, we'll be reaping the benefits in not having to go through those expenses and already having a building that's future proof. Once we kind of get down the path of talking about certifications, I definitely want to talk about LEED certification, because I think that, just to a previous point, that it goes a long way in, ensuring that our building's going to cost less to maintain and that it's creating less waste overall, and ensuring that our employees have good air quality to work in as well. So excited about the direction that we're going with this one.
Councilmember Duran Mullica?
Yeah, so I think that there's so much probably to unpack in this conversation, and what it means, and it's just probably way too early for us to really decide where we're going to land. One of the, requests, and I'm just making an assumption here, but when you come back and actually present, what the building is going to look like and start talking about cost implications of that, are we going to have kind of like a standard of options we could choose about, do we meet net zero for this cost, and then this is how much extra for a LEED certification? So, I think having that out as options just helps give us, how do we weigh cost versus, where we want to go out with sustainability. Because I know that there's probably folks on this council who are really concerned about, how much is this building going to cost us, right? We need to be thoughtful about what that is. And then we also have folks who, want it to be very, very green. So, weighing those options, and if we could see really great comparison packages, that would just be helpful with the decision.
Absolutely. So the way that we tend to go about it, and you'll see this coming up soon, is we build a cost model. So the first thing we do before we put options in front of you that someone loves or someone hates, I think understanding the implications you're talking about on paper, on a spreadsheet, is very important. And so we've begun that process in the background.
Okay.
We're still early, and I don't think it's ready to really, prime time, but soon we will be presenting with cost scenarios and a program and honing in on the size of your building. And so when we're able to do that, we're able to have a baseline cost, and then I think we can tag onto that premiums for net zero or for any certifications. And if those become a very high priority and your space needs are X, well, maybe your space needs need to go down as other priorities. So I think those are the levers I'm assuming and we've seen are the most valuable, and that you can actually then make some determinations. And if you're wise and you can save some space or cut some space over here, you can afford more photovoltaic or vice versa, any scenario, right? So yes, the intent is that we will bring you scenarios and recommendations to help you achieve your goals. So.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Goff?
Thank you. Yeah, I also am quite excited about the idea of this being a more sustainable building, certainly than what we have now. But and also that I would like to see not just that what it's going to cost to build this, but like the cost over, like this building is many decades old. Like we would certainly be saving some money over time. So I definitely want to do some comparisons on that.
That's right. Yeah. And so we often call it the life cycle cost. And so that will certainly be a part of the calculation where you'll get to see your energy bill of this building compared to your energy bill of your new building. And that difference will, over time, will pay for itself.
Right, thank you.
Great.
Yes.
Okay. All for now.
Okay. Well, moving on to certification. So LEED certification, and I'm going to go over two certification types that we think are most applicable to you all here. I think it's worth mentioning. So LEED certification is a standard within the industry. It measures a building on these different categories you see around the wheel, from innovative design to location and linkages, which is effectively transportation, sustainable sites, water and efficiency, energy, atmosphere, materials and resources, indoor environmental quality, education, and awareness. So you receive a score, or you go after points within each of those categories, and your certification can land in either of these 4 categories. Certified if you achieve 40 to 49 points, silver, gold, platinum, et cetera, as you can see. So LEED itself, it tends to, there are a number of different categories. There are points you have to go after in certain categories. And so you are inevitably spending money on the certification process itself. So net zero, where you see a 1-to-1 cost, there are extra costs associated with pursuing LEED certification that are simply about managing the certification itself. So I think that it's a really valiant certification process. It's tested, but there are things that may not, that you'll just have to do. There are additional requirements that will push you and your building.
Councilmember Brown?
And then I start to cough. I'm so sorry. Isn't the police department LEED certified, Heather?
Nope, it is not LEED certified.
And the rec center isn't either?
No, yeah.
You know, I realize that it's going to cost us money, but I think that with each step, we need to break down the cost, because I really do feel this is important to our building. You know, somebody had said leading by example. That's absolutely true. You know, I understand that, like the police department, there we may get into a position where we have to shave, where we were going to do solar in certain places and then we didn't when it was done. I get that, but I'd like to get as close as possible.
Councilmember
I'm
Duran Malika?
Just a quick question, and I think you said this in my interview, but I just want to make sure that it's correct and that other council members know. So if we were to pursue like a net zero building, did you say that we would be the first city hall in the state or one of the first?
I think, yeah, I'd have to check
Okay.
on record. I would have to check that, but I think you would be one of the first, if not the first. Yeah.
Okay.
There-
See, I mean, I wouldn't mind being the, so that'd be cool.
Absolutely.
So that could be a good selling.
Mayor Pro Tem Wolford?
Yeah, so we would, I believe Aspen City Hall may be net zero, and others may be net zero because it's like they can add solar on to offset like their gas and their electricity. But if we were all electric, we would be the first city hall, I think probably in like the western half of the US to be all electric. So definitely leading by example.
Okay.
So we'll dive more into that, and it'll be part of future discussions to help you really determine whether or not we want to pursue it.
You'll have to do lots of research to
Yes.
see where can we be first, and then
That's right.
and then we'll hurry up and build it.
Yeah.
I think as we get down the road, it like in every project, it becomes clear, you know, there are trade-offs. And
Yeah.
so I think the important thing will be presenting the trade-offs in the light that you want to see them. And I think there is a case to be made pursuing net zero versus pursuing LEED. Pursuing both, you're paying a premium on top of a premium, or so I think that's probably the conversation that you'll want to have.
I guess in all fairness, I mean, there's also some overlap.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, there are things that when you pursue net zero, you accomplish, you inherently are putting yourself in a better position for LEED certification and probably at a high level.
Yeah.
So there is definitely overlap
Yeah.
amongst all of these activities.
Okay.
So,
And I guess I would also throw out there that both with Justice and the Rec Center, while we didn't pursue LEED, if we had, I'm sure we would have achieved a higher level of certification because we were very conscious about the energy conservation codes, about putting in the future solar or photovoltaic for the Justice Center and the PV that we did on the rec center plus the charging station. So I think had we gone through the documentation process, we probably would have achieved, you know, a very good rating. But when we designed it, we had that in mind to strive for those objectives, but without actually going through the LEED process. So just want to throw that out there as well. It was part of the DNA of the process.
There are much fewer buildings, but we wanted to bring this to your attention. If there were there are other certifications that are smaller. These two are probably the most well-known.
Can you think of an example of a well-built?
There's a growing number. There's a lot fewer in the state. We've
How to be first.
Right?
Oh, okay.
We're gonna do it all.
yes. So I can go back, or I can answer more questions, or I can expand on any of those. But as just a teaser out there, that's kind of what the table is going to look like. Really an overarching theme. You know, currently residents come to the city hall, they pay a bill, they get their passport, and not much more. So what does it mean to create a space where residents feel compelled to stay? And the top three: library, indoor, outdoor event space, and public art. I believe everyone had in their interview in some form or another, which is why those are the three that are on the overall consensus summary. I think if we start with the big one, actually, why don't we start from below and maybe end with library? 'Cause I think Heather's gonna want to chime in on some of the library piece. So public art was unanimous. I don't think there's anyone who didn't want or see the value that public art has. I think the conversations revolved less around on, you know, we need a museum or we need a welcome center, standalone welcome center. And I think more of the conversations with different council members were about, well, how do we make art integral to everything? How do we make art integral to the experience, to the lobby, to your procession, to the council chambers? And I think those were a little more salient, and it seemed people got more excited about those ideas. The next two bullet points are really just some comments and ideas of rotating art, having culturally inclusive art being a focus. I think the idea of artist in residence was brought up. So you could have a rotating artist creating murals or a mural. And then, like I said, history and art integrated throughout the public spaces. The indoor-outdoor event space, I think that there were a number of bullet points that we could have put under there and a number of ideas, but I think the overarching theme on that was that this city hall needs to be seen in the context of the Civic Center, and I think everyone's quite aware of that. So when you step back and look at it within that context, the idea that this city hall needs to contribute to the vibrancy, to the critical mass of that Civic Center. So there are events going on here. There will be development going on here. You have the rec center already. So tapping into those synergies, I think, is important. It's wise, and it's something that throughout the design we'll look for opportunities to do. So, and finally on the library, the bullet points on the screen there are really all hovered around, I think, one bullet point. I think the programs that attract community are more important than the books. I think that was something we heard from most council members. And there were so many wonderful ideas and different programs that were talked about as we were speaking about the library. And again, they really had less to do with the traditional sense of a library and what the future and growing functions of a library are. And from youth engagement, teen nights and story times, workforce center, study rooms, meeting rooms, access to computers, access to the internet, very basic and fundamental rights. And business incubator partnerships, someone mentioned a partnership, a business incubator with Front Range Community College, maker spaces, video production, music and podcast recording spaces. So those are just a smattering of some of the ideas that were thrown out there. And I think with that, maybe Heather,
And she seemed she thinks the door is the board, their board. This isn't a discussion that their board would be. And so, if council's interested based on your discussion time, maybe once a week, they could do some type pop-up something into, what. There's certainly, also gives me direction. I can reach out to her and say, yes, I have the. We can. 100 square feet, flexible use space. Looks like.
I have 3 hands, but really quickly, maybe Stefan can help me out. As it relates to this room we're in, what is 800 square feet?
so in this room right now, I think this is a bit larger than 800 square feet. This is probably closer to 12 to 1,400.
Okay.
I would speculate it's from that wall that's adjacent to you to the service grill chair across. So think of it, basically think of it as one of your classrooms.
Got it. Okay. I wish I had classrooms that big. My library might be this big. Okay. So that's what I just wanted a visual on what
Sure.
that meant.
Yeah,
Okay.
great question.
Councilmember Goff?
Thank you. First of all, it kind of like was a jolt to my heart to hear somebody say something is more important than books. But I know that if we are going to do anything library-like in the space, that we are going to need the Rangeview Library District people to support it. And I know I mean, we just can't build something specifically for them and then it doesn't work out. So we're gonna have to be a little more open-minded about that. If we did do something for youth in some way, like I really like the maker space, the video production, music podcasting, recording space, but we'd need staff, or somehow we need to figure out a staff for that. I don't know if there are, grants or organizations out there. I would hope that looking into some of that might be part of this process.
Councilmember Duran Malika?
Yeah, so I think, I don't know if everybody even understands where we're coming at with this library and the city hall thing, because they're like, why would you put a library in city hall? And for me personally, it's because there's a huge gap in services in our city. And anything or Rangeview library system refuses to partner or invest in our community. And that is really the reality of that. And that is, so what we're trying to do is trying to fill in gaps the best we can with our city, even though our taxpayers are paying for the Rangeview Library. So just throwing that out there. So, I mean, I think we do have to be really creative about what this little space can be. But it is in essence, and in my interview I said this, it's all of the programming, the amazing programming that Anythink Libraries offers. We need to figure out how to incorporate some of that into our city hall because we don't have access to it elsewhere. And so obviously this is a larger issue, but that is kind of the thought behind a library in the city hall, is because we're simply just trying to fill a gap that our residents don't have. So that's my personal take on it. I'm not sure how other council members feel, but it's something that I feel is just a huge disservice to the residents of Northglenn to not be able to have those types of services. And so the fact that we have to go above and beyond to provide those it's a real shot in the heart for me. But that's where we're at. So I think programming is going to have to be really creative. And then honestly, and having this conversation with Anythink too, is if we need these services, you're not willing to provide them, how does this relationship move forward with us? I mean, I just feel like that's a really touchy conversation to have, but, you know, and then programming for this is gonna have to be included in the costs, right? Of how we intend to use the space, so, that would be one thing that I'd like to also see when we start talking about the dollars is, you know, staff that we're gonna need to hire to provide these services that anything refuses to give us.
So to piggyback on that really quickly, my question is how hard can we push and what are our options? Because I'm with you on that. I'm pretty frustrated that the response was somewhat no. I saw it as more of a maybe, but if it is no, I'd like to know how hard we can push on that because I completely agree with everything you said. And a library in this location, to me, it's less about City Hall. I think that gives us an opportunity, but it's more about the Civic Center location.
Yeah.
Near the rec center, near that space that we want to create for our residents as a place to come. I would love it to be a library. And so I would like to know how hard we can push to make that happen. Or what our options are. So I don't know if that's a question for Corey.
I was just gonna ask Heather that question as to whether, how hard is too hard? Because there's certainly looking at options in terms of, what might be available to create our own library system, frankly. And I don't know if that's going too far.
Well, I think that's the farthest, and I would frame it as the farthest in my brief. Well, that's so funny. I would put that as, let me rephrase it. It's an option, right? I would say it's a riskier, more expensive option because you have residents who are already paying tax dollars into the district. So how far, I think we need to open the conversation, and I need direction from council to say, we really ultimately want a library, and this is what a library looks like to us. How can we get there? Is my initial reaction, and then what varying options in between. Like if programming a space 800 square feet isn't council's vision, then I need you to say that to me and say, we want this. And then I've got to go alongside, probably the mayor needs to be involved in this discussion with their board and Catherine as the council liaison and say, we really want this. How do we make this happen? I asked Pam very directly, and this is something we can do in the short term, and then if you want to provide Corey with direction to do the research on what would it take to create our own library district or provide our own library services, not district, but provide our own library services, it's something he could certainly look at. But I think in the spirit of collaboration, we really need to make our intentions known to anything library district and say, we really want this. And I think we've been pretty transparent about the why all along. You know, that's really in my mind pushing their board to recognize that if they don't have the money available currently, then at what point are they willing to go back out to voters and ask again? They asked in 2018, they asked in 2019. If this is a subject you feel passionate about, then we can figure out a path on how to navigate what's involved.
Well, and I wonder, I mean, I guess what I'm worried about for planning purposes, because if that's 800 square feet, I feel like we need at least the space of this current chambers. And I'm picturing the one we saw at Edgewater, so that, then if planning purposes is 1,200 versus 800, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
I do personally think it's a fight worth having. I think, to your point, this is not just because I love libraries. This is because it is a need and it is a gap in services. And I think they need to hear from us that we are serious. And maybe that's all of council coming forward with this, but also, I think you had mentioned something about possibly having to subsidize it. Like, if we're building it, then some of those costs don't fall on them. And so how is that cost share happen so that they will do it?
All details to figure out, right?
And if I could, just to be clear, if I were to look into this, one of the, I guess, premises would be that the folks in Northglenn are not subject to double taxation. So it would have to be
Right.
something like being excluded from the library district in order to, for the city to provide the services. So libraries are very unique quasi-governmental entities under Colorado law. They're much different than other types of local government districts. But if this were, for example, and I don't want to, I say this only as an example, not, but if
Right.
Northglenn were to create a fire department,
Mm-hmm.
it would no longer need to be served by North Metro. Same idea, but libraries are a much different type of entity. So that would be sort of the research, and even from my perspective, telling them that you were looking at those things is a huge step.
Because there's a huge process that you go through
Mm-hmm.
if you want to remove yourself from the district,
Absolutely.
a district.
So before, I know we still have two more hands up. I mean, because I think this is direction to Corey and direction to Heather to push harder on that. How is everyone feeling about that?
I would like to have a chance to speak to it
Okay,
before direction, okay?
great. Councilmember
because-
Brown, you're up.
I just want to get it on the record. Thank you very much. I know that Northglenn needs a library. I know that we want a library. I'm not in favor at all of putting it in City Hall. I think that there's other things, as Councilmember Goff had said, you know, about creating events and things like that. But in all honesty, looking at it from a resident perspective and from a city council perspective, this is not an area that we were elected to get involved with. We can pursue working with the library, but for us to put any money financially into a library it just is not a like Corey said, it's double taxation. It's not our responsibility. Working towards getting a library here as elected officials is our responsibility. But to put a library into City Hall is not our responsibility, nor is it anything that I think we should do cost sharing with or anything. They need to give us a library, just like they've given Thornton 27. And, you know, we may help out. Maybe we could donate some land or something like that. But this is not a city council. It's not an area that we have any, as far as I'm concerned, and this is just my opinion, any business getting into. We are not a library. We are a city government. And I just don't think that this is an appropriate piece of business for us. I understand that I'm in the majority, but I think that emotions may also be in play because we do want a library. And don't take me wrong, I do want a library here. I would love anything on the campus, but that's not appropriate for city council or in city hall. The other thing that I just wanted to say when I'm looking at these comments as far as the library, we already have all of our, well, we have our youth engagement coming out of the rec center. And there were things done to ensure that they had space there. Along with teen nights, we have what is that, Club 12, I think, or club, you know, whatever the teen club is. And we have story times over at the rec center. So I think that in some way, we need to look at what we're really trying to do here. I think that what some of council is really trying to do is to force our hand on a library. And it's not our place. If we want to do an election to see if that's what, you know, in the next election, if we want to throw it out to the public and see if that's something that they're interested in pursuing, then, you know, that I think that would be a good move, but I don't feel it's a city council. Now that's my opinion. And you all can take it for what it's worth, but having a library, running a library, offering staffing to a library is not a function of city council. You know, we have to look at in my opinion, we have to look at a different way of getting a library in here. But that's not a city council responsibility. And we just need to figure out a different way to do it. That's my opinion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Brown.
Oh,
I did want to highlight slide 22 and 23, because that was also part of why I was advocating for it, is because the library comes out as the number one in two different resident community engagement opportunities. So it wasn't, I mean, it is just not my opinion. I was responding to the data on slides 22 and 23.
I totally understand that, but if you were to go out to the community and say, hey, would you like a library and are you willing to pay for it? That's going to be a whole different answer. You know, it's going to be a whole 50% of the people may go, yeah, I'll pay a little bit more in my taxes, or yeah, I don't have a problem with that. But you are going to have a portion that is saying, I'm already paying taxes. Why aren't they coming here? Then we need to push in that direction. But we can't recreate the wheel because we're not getting what we want.
So to clarify, Councilmember Brown, do you support pushing the library district a little harder?
I support pushing the library district a little further to see if we can get any movement from them. I do not support in any way, you know, funding this project in any way. Now, with that said, I might be willing to say, okay, we have some land over here. Would like to give it to you to build us a library in Northglenn. You know, it's a donation. Go ahead and, you know, whatever. We've done that in some other cases. So I'm okay with that. It's not a function of the city.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Wilford?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've definitely appreciated this conversation and the perspectives that I've shared. I think, I guess one of the things I was just hoping to maybe ask for is, it seems like there are a lot of opportunities and different things that could be investigated. I wonder if one of the ways that we can push the Anything Library District is to put together a study session and really look at all of our different options in terms of, you know, like maybe we leave the library district and we ask our voters if that's something they want to do. Maybe we, you know, forge ahead and look at doing our own library or providing the services of it. But like, what does that mean and what are the processes so that we can have a more, I think, full discussion? And my hope is that by having that more full discussion, that the board at Anything Library can see that we mean business when it comes to bringing a library to our community, because this is not the first conversation that we have had. And this is not the first time that we have said to Anything Library that we want a library to return to Northglenn. I know that previous council members were very, very passionate and had shared our interest and had offered on many occasions different ideas and tours throughout the city of places that Anything could find a home. And it just feels like it's kind of fallen on deaf ears. And I do really believe, to Councilmember Molika's point, as well as to the mayor's point, that we have a population that is really looking for a library to find its home in Northglenn, and there continues to be that gap, right? And our residents do pay in to the library system, yet we don't have very much to show for it. So, you know, I think it's time to have this tough conversation, and I think it's time to push it and to get an answer in terms of what direction we're going to go. And I think a study session will go a long way in delivering that. Thank you.
Thank you. Not to make a bigger issue, but I have a question. And if I'm off base, just say not now. Can it be part of the rec center reuse?
Potentially. You know, we're exploring all options. Exploring all options. Here's what I hear from Pam. They don't have money. So I think I've heard a couple different things. Council wants to be more informed on what options exist for you moving forward in this, under this general framework of, we want to push the library district to provide, well, I just lost my train of thought. We want to push on them because ultimately what I'm hearing is you want to explore what it would take to get a library here at the city. One thing that I think is important to mention based on comments that have been shared by council is there are cities all across the country that are in the library services business. In Colorado, you see a blend of those services being provided by a city or by a district. So there's lots of different models out there. Currently, we reside within a taxing district. So there's those pieces of it. So Corey and I can pull together a study session, give you all the ins and outs of what it would look like, and I can reach out to Pam and say, this is what I heard from my council. This is how we'd like to move forward. And, you know, what does that look like for you guys? It really puts us into the first part of next year based on her feedback from today. And so if council wants something more than 800 square feet, that's the direction I need. If you want a library run by anything library district, then that's the ask that I need to make of them. If they say no, and I'm assuming they probably will based on conversations up to this point, and Pam today saying, I don't have money for a branch to staff or for capital construction. Now, there's different ways to get there in terms of subsidy and grants and all of that stuff, but I think those are conversations that can be had. So there's a lot of information that we can bring back to you if that's council's direction tonight, to come back to you at a future study session. And in the meantime, I would reach out and set things in motion with Pam.
Well, I think Mayor Pro Tem had a good idea as far as bringing a study session to the table with all of our options, because I hear what Councilmember Brown is saying, and if the city hall is not the right place for that, but if the old rec center space might be able to squeeze in a library. I don't know what the vision is over there. I'm just trying to think about what our options are. So I don't know. Councilmember Duran Malika?
Yeah, I think that I was gonna just shout out to Becky. Her camera's off now, so I don't know if she's there. But I think that she had some really good points. I don't want to tax my citizens twice, right? We are already paying for library services. We just don't have access to them that's close enough for any of our residents to really go to. So that's what makes me feel so uncomfortable about all of this, Becky, is the fact that, we're trying to fill gaps that we shouldn't really have to fill, to be honest with you. And so, pursuing a different relationship or a different process with anything or our own library, that seems like it would be doing our residents a little bit more justice so that they're not having to pay twice for the same services that they should be getting. And we shouldn't have to be supplementing Thornton's, libraries. So those are just some of my thoughts. Do I think we need more than 800 square feet? Yes, I think we do. So I think that is really kind of brings us back to this presentation, and thank you for sitting with us as we continue to touch a very sensitive point. But yes, I think we do need more than 800 square feet, in my opinion. I don't think that our citizens should have to pay double for the services that we need. So.
And keep in mind, I'll just add that the space could be finished out space, unlike what we saw in Edgewater, right, where they have that area that's just completely unfinished. It could be finished out space that is functional for a period of time that the library could move in and do some tenant finish work to retrofit that space to fit them, if that's the direction you go, and it's a number of years down the road after we're done building the building itself.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't want to hold up
Yeah.
For those conversations. Councilmember Goff?
Well, in light of that, maybe I could hold off on my comments, but I would just say that we've had conversations with Ranger Library District, for years, and I totally understand we don't have enough money, except that then they decided to put another one in Thornton. So they had money for that, and I don't know the ins and outs. Maybe there were grants or other things going on there, but I just feel like we need to kind of, kind of like dig our heels in and say, hey, it's time for us.
Yes, yeah. All right, you ready to finish? Thank you for
No,
listening.
Absolutely, it's an important subject. There are ways that we can, as Eric said, accommodate future need. We can continue to plan the building. So we will be responsive to your needs.
Okay, thanks.
And that was perfect timing. It was open discussion was the
Oh,
next.
there you go.
So that was the last point, and we did want, we knew this was on top of mind of a lot of folks. So, are there any other items that anyone wanted to ask questions, or I think opening it up before we close, and we can show you the overall schedule that we have planned so far.
I would just like to thank you. I appreciated that the whole team took the time to do the tours, which we know took multiple days, and to do the interviews, which also took multiple days, to really bring together this information. I think it does capture what I've heard people say, what I've heard the community say, and just thank you to staff and AMD for all your work. I mean, it's a lot, so thank you.
Absolutely. And if there's anything on here, you have the PowerPoint, you're like, they did not bring this up. We will remedy that, so, yeah,
Thank you.
welcome.
I
So
like the timeline, though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great.
So to close, yeah, we are, this is tentative, but the idea so far that we've discussed with the core project team, with Heather and Brooke and Nate and Eric and others, is trying to hit a design schedule that wraps up towards the end of next summer, early fall. And at that point, we would roll into construction. The construction timeline, there's a big plus or minus there. We really do need to have the onboarding of the contractor, which we are planning to do. The process is underway, coming, and Eric and the team have that going. So if all goes well and we have that team on board early next year, some anticipated early February, I think it'll align very well with our design schedule to be able to validate a lot of the conversations that we're going to have about cost, about options, about cost scenarios. So,
Great.
And I do just want to say, we did begin the procurement process for the CMGC. So it'd be the same process that we did with the Justice Center, with the Rec Center, and with the Force Main, the lift station as well. So I just want to let you know it's the same process. It's an RFQ, RFP process. We anticipate bringing something to you all in beginning of February. So just on.
Eric, will you just briefly explain why that process is a process we prefer and why it's important related to the overall management of costs and?
Yeah, so the key with the CMGC process, it's there's a number of ways to describe it. CMAR is another one, construction manager at risk. So what it does is it brings in the general contractor while we're still doing design of the building, so that they have a say in the cost and help to value engineer, so we're not getting to the end of the project and what's being designed is way out of line for the budget. So what it does is it kind of hones in those budget numbers early in the process so that we don't get to that construction CD drawings and we have to completely start from the beginning. So it's kind of a risk thing that's been successful for us here and in a lot of our big capital projects lately.
Great, thank you.
and we'll be on the schedule. I mean, to close, the immediate next steps are, I think we'll take this information. We'll be coming up with some space planning with sizes. You heard that 800 square foot number thrown out there, but I think it's time that a lot of these other spaces we start to put numbers to, which will allow us to wrap up programming and to continue to move on to concept design. So,
Great. Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks, Stefan.
Thank you, we appreciate it. All right, next up, Commander Ron Osgood is here for our 4th of July enforcement debrief.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So I'm here tonight to go over the police department's memorandum on our 4th of July enforcement. For those of you who don't know me, I've been with the department for about 30 years, and I'm recently been put back in patrol. So thank you for giving me the time to go over this tonight. Let's see if I've got this set up correctly. Should I just go ahead and start with this, ma'am?
Yeah, if you click forward.
Oh, there we go. Okay. So what we've got here is a quick PowerPoint to go over the bullet points of the memorandum we put out. So for those of you at home, we'll go ahead and go on page 5 of 15 of your packet. The fireworks enforcement is the first page we'll come up to. Then go ahead and go to page 6 now. The purpose of this is to provide the city council with information on the police department's 4th of July fireworks enforcement in 2021 and seek city council direction for the 2022 planning process. So here's some background. Oops, that doesn't look right. I go the wrong one. Oops, sorry. I apologize, I hit the button twice there. Okay, first one.
Ron, do you want me to click for you? Would that be
Would
helpful?
I'm sorry.
I can click for you. That way you just tell me when you want me to advance it.
So for the background, the ordinance enacted by City Council in 2019, Code Section 9-7-2, prohibit the sale and use and possession of fireworks within the city. The ordinance provided additional enforcement capabilities. And please, if you have any questions or if I need to explain, just let me know. The communications plan educated residents on the danger of fireworks. And enforcement of fireworks mostly focused on the holiday weekend, especially on the 4th. Go ahead to the next page, page 8 of 15. Per the ordinance, fireworks are defined as any article, device, or substance prepared for the primary purpose of producing a visual or auditory sensation by combustion, explosion, deflagration, or detonation, including but not limited to firecrackers, torpedoes, skyrockets, rockets, Roman candles. Fireworks containing inexplosive or flammable compound or any tablets or other devices containing any explosive substance. Next page, please. Fireworks do not include toy caps, sparklers, trick matches, cigarette loads, noisemakers, or toy smoke devices. Okay. Next page, page 10. The events. The fireworks show was canceled at EB Range Junior Memorial Park. So the city had smaller events that were held at EB Range Park, Wyco Park, Hugh Danahay Park, and North Park and Fox Run. Officers were assigned to work the park events to ensure public safety. Page 11. Events. The expectation is to return to the traditional 4th of July festival in 2022. The festival provides an opportunity for community members to gather in a central location to enjoy a city-sponsored and professionally produced fireworks display. During the event, all available police officers' resources will be utilized to ensure public safety. Page 12. For the staffing, department resources will not be available to provide the level of the fireworks enforcement we have seen during the past 2 years. A review of the department's approach to illegal fireworks enforcement will be necessary.
Commander Osgood, I see that Councilmember Brown has her hand up.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, please ignore the screaming in the background. Should it get bad? My first question was, what is a toy smoke device?
You know, ma'am, I tried to look some of that up. I couldn't find anything specifically to that. I know you have some of the little smoke bombs and caps, but I couldn't find anything specific to that.
Now, would you consider smoke bombs and caps? I'm sorry, I can leave the meeting. Would you consider those toy smoke devices?
Yeah, I think it would depend on the size and how, and, you know, the flammability and what that would create.
Okay. I'll hold all the rest of mine until later.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and again, let's make sure I go back to our points, the next page. Here's a quick breakdown of the statistics. I guess I'll go ahead and read them all. The calls for service on July 4th in 2019, we had 257 calls for service total. In 2020, 358. In 2021, 276. Of those specific fireworks calls, 122 in 2019, 234 in 2020, 176 in 2021. Criminal and fireworks citations on July 4th. In 2019, the department wrote 5. In 2020, 70. In 2021, 79. Specific fireworks violations, 2019, 0. 2020, 61. In 2021, 76. Fireworks calls year-to-date through July 5th. In 2019, 212. In 2020, 591. In 2021, 369. Fireworks specific citations year-to-date through July 5th. 2019, 3. 2020, 83. 2021, 102.
Commander,
Yes, ma'am.
it's not necessary for you to read all of the data
Okay,
to council,
I
so go ahead and
apologize.
just, no, it's okay. Just provide an overview.
Okay.
Okay.
So then we can just look at agency comparisons for neighboring agencies, and you can see the number of summonses written by these outside agencies versus ours that are listed. And as you can see, just to quickly go to that point that the city manager made, we wrote 76 summonses on the 4th. The next highest was 5. So just to kind of show what our enforcement looked like compared to neighboring cities. Okay, I guess it's time for questions now.
Well, Commander Osgood, thank you for this. I guess I kind of want to go back to slide 12.
Okay.
So I feel like there's more than just, do we have questions for you, but like, when is this discussion going to happen?
Well, this is the start of it.
Okay.
You know, based on, we've been very open and transparent over the last year that once we return to normal, have our normal 4th of July event, that we're not going to be able to provide that same level of enforcement that we have the last 2 summers. So leading into next year, we can certainly have this discussion sometime in the spring. And between now and then, if tonight council can provide us with any guidance or feedback on this is what important aspect is front of mind for you in terms of enforcement. But, you know, simply put, we won't be able to do the all hands on deck, everybody, every officer in the department working. No one's on vacation approach because and Chief can speak to this, the intensive nature of ensuring the public safety at the park looks very different for us.
So that's one of the things that I just wanted to cover real quick. The last couple of years, we were able to put a bunch of teams out there in every ward to go after and aggressively enforce the fireworks. As you can see by the numbers, that's exactly what they did. But when you have an event, when you have 10 to 20,000 people at the event, that's our primary responsibility, make sure that's a safe event for the whole day, and also make sure that when they leave, we control the traffic and the movement out of that park, and that is very officer intensive. So when it comes to some of those things and trying to discuss what that enforcement action is going to look like in 2022, again, the only ones working the road that night are our patrol officers, which is, you know, the shift. We might have 5 officers and a supervisor, and they're handling, you saw the calls for service, you know, 200 to 300 calls for service in that span. And it goes by priority. And I know for some people, fireworks is a priority. However, there's other calls that take much more priority, disturbances, DUIs, everything else when it comes to safety of those communities and dangers to our community that we have to make sure those are the calls handled first. Again, on just some of the preliminary stuff, seeing if maybe we could get two-person teams. Each side of the highway is probably right now the best that we can do, depending on some of the staffing that we will see in the future, trying to get officers on board. Other things too is, you know, during our day at the park, depending on budget, we talked about also possibilities, maybe, you know, bringing in different security groups to assist with that as well. And that frees up officers for the night. But again, it's how the approach, you know, when it's zero tolerance, you know, when we're out there and we catch somebody with fireworks and we spend the next 10, 15 minutes writing that summons rather than having discretion on 4th of July where we go up, talk to them, maybe confiscate fireworks, give them a warning. You know, that's a lot quicker. We can get to a lot more calls doing it that way. So again, it's, you know, what the council's expectation, the community expectation of what, you know, that's going to look like for 2022. And again, Commander Osgood and I, we've worked many 4th of Julys. He's actually worked the nights forever for the last, so he understands the complexities when it comes to resource, because it is resource intensive, so.
Okay, well, we have lots of hands. We'll start with Councilmember Lukman Hiramasa.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You have tons of questions. That was the first thing that I noticed. So I guess my question is, are you asking us maybe to take a look at the ordinance because you have to enforce the ordinance if there's not enough staff to cover certain events, or is this a resource issue that the police department needs more staffing? Is it a combination of all the things? So first, I'm trying to, you know, understand
Sure.
where.
Event, you know, the park event, when you talk of, depending on what information you get, I've heard reports anywhere from 10 to almost 20,000 people attend those events. That is huge resource intensive, and even at full staff, we're only in the 70s. So, you know, the numbers there. And like the chief said, I've been doing 4th of July since 1992 here, and it is and we have had some incidents in the parks that were very labor intensive in the past. That sometimes when things go smooth, you may not need a lot of officers, but you have to be prepared if something does happen. And it can take a lot of officers to deal with things that come up in the parks. And also, some of you also aware of some of the incidents we do have on the 4th. And one of we had a person around shooting a gun, which took up a ton of resources this year. So those things they're very difficult. And like the chief was just saying, we absolutely can still do the no tolerance enforcement. We just won't have the amount of teams out there to put this kind of effort into it. We just won't, just because the amount of staffing it takes to do that large of an event at the park. Even with the additional security and things like that, it's very labor intensive. And then, of course, since Thornton has opened theirs up just next door, even the traffic that goes between 112th and I remember one year I had to go down the Fox Run as one of the sergeants on the duty because they were putting right down our bike path. They literally took their event and put them down the bike path into our neighborhoods. So I had to get officers down there to try to deal with that situation. So it is very labor intensive. And even if, you know, increased staffing the police department would always be nice, but that's not something that can be accomplished from now until the 4th of July. I mean, it takes a long time to get staffing up to those levels, and even then. So I think our thing is to give the information to how we want to look at and how we do that enforcement realizing that we will not have the kind of numbers to put out like we did the last 2 years with COVID canceling that large event.
The ordinance is, again, I think that's something that we definitely need before we went off the state code and then putting that. So I really like our ordinance. It's a very good ordinance, so I don't want to get rid of that. You know, one of those elements that you guys, that council put in there for us that really, you know, helped was the fact that if they're shooting fireworks off and we couldn't see them from that house in the backyard and they wouldn't come to the front door, we could go back later and issue a summons to the owner responsible for that property. So again, I think it's a great ordinance. You know, some of the things, if you want zero tolerance, just, you know, the expectation is it takes a little longer to issue everybody we come in contact with a ticket. So, and then if we only have 2 teams, because the reason why I have 2-person teams, officer teams, is for safety. When we're issuing summonses to people for fireworks, it raises that level of tension with community members. And I want to say that too about your police officers and how well they did their job. They wrote that many tickets and they didn't have to use of force at all that night. With a lot of intoxicated people, you know, giving them that. So that says a lot about how they enforce and how they, the customer service they provided, even when they're issuing a fireworks ticket. So I think that's the thing, the discussion that I would like some direction from council would be at what level of enforcement. If you want the zero tolerance, we'll do the zero tolerance, right? If you're gonna give us discretion, we'd like, you know, also, you know, do the discretion, that would be fine too. So again, I think that's what, you know, we're looking for from council, your expectations, but then those expectations, we need to get to the community and saying, hey, this is what's gonna happen. There's still gonna be officers out there, and if you're abusing it, you know, they'll issue tickets if it's not a zero tolerance, but if it's zero tolerance, they find you, we're gonna issue a ticket.
Thank you for that. I guess what I'm seeing when I'm hearing you say that is maybe something along the lines of what we have for our snowstormers plan, where there's different levels of service depending on, you know, what the need is. So I guess I was just trying to get a feel for what kind of solutions you're looking to hear from us, or, you know, because you're the experts and you see day to day what it is that the need really is going to be. So private security, or having maybe a stepped plan that kind of outlines how you're going to deal with certain calls depending on sort of urgency.
And for the 4th of July weekend, right? So again, we can have that zero tolerance built in on everything but the 4th of July, right? So if they're shooting off fireworks the 1st through the 3rd, our officers are writing them tickets, or the 5th, we're writing automatic tickets. But on the 4th, it gives them an opportunity where, especially calls pending and everything else, when you have to shuffle through 250 to 300 calls for service, that just helps us a little more doing that.
Thank you. Yeah. I'll give members a chance to speak. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I wanted to go back to the data slide, because I guess what I was inferring from the presentation is that you're saying because the event will be back, the tickets will be fewer. So if you look, 2019, there were 5 tickets on July 4th. And then the 2 years we didn't have an event, you had more time and space to do that. I want to hear from other council members, but my concern, if the discretion, I believe, puts you at risk. It puts you at risk to have people make claims that you made a decision for one person and you made a different decision for another person, and you let this person off the hook, but you put that person, possibly of color, and gave them a ticket. Like, I believe it puts you at risk to have the discretion. That makes me super, super nervous. You know I love fireworks enforcement. However, I see what you're saying. What you're saying is we can't hit the 70 and 79 numbers. We can't pull that in for you. That's fine. The zero tolerance thing makes me super nervous about what that could look like on the flip side and what accusations could come at you. And I mean, but if you're saying, hey, council, lower your expectations, okay. That's not a hard thing to do. That zero tolerance thing makes me super nervous. So,
Well,
go ahead.
those are very good points, ma'am. But just so you know, the police department across the United States have discretion in almost everything. There are very, very few crimes that we don't have discretion in, domestic violence and something like that. And that said, in some of the things you brought up, we were accused of that with these.
All the time.
We were accused of those very things even with full tolerance,
Yeah.
with no tolerance.
Mm-hmm.
The other way that we could split that tolerance is that maybe certain of the lesser, which other agencies have done, the lesser type fireworks versus like the 2-inch mortars and things like that, where it's not based on what you say, but based on the type of nuisance it causes or the fire danger. So something like that we could look at. And I'll go back to 2019, another point you brought up. I was not the patrol commander at that time. I would be very disappointed even with my normal police staffing that we only wrote 5 summonses, even if it was just my day shift, swing shift, and graveyards, normal staffing. I would be very disappointed in that. And I would have a lot of conversations with my sergeants and my lieutenants if that happened.
Yeah.
We just want to look at, I think, just to present that this is going to change. No matter how we balance this, we are not going to have the resources to put into fireworks enforcement that we've had the last 2 years, unless, of course, another variant comes up and then we're not unable to hold things again. So that's why, because we want to do our best to, for our community. And so, and you're the voice of our community, and we want to do the best we can by our community. But the best is to give them what information that we have available and what resources we have available.
Councilmember Brown?
Okay, I'm ready to rant again.
Yes, ma'am.
You ready? I think that when we as a council sat back and we decided what no tolerance looked like to us, I don't think we understood, benefit of the doubt. I don't think we really understood what no tolerance meant. I mean, my problem became, although, it was huge, my problem became that they could drive over to Colorado Boulevard and 120th and purchase fireworks that don't go off the ground. I think we have to look at rewriting our policy as to what we really think it should cover. I mean, I did have a constituent that across the street from me that her sparklers were confiscated, and that's why I asked you the question on the smoke toys, because they had those little tiny like cherry things, that just did smoke and let go, and they got $1,000 fine for it. I got several calls because it was a war zone over here, and I understand that. But as I was going through the process, I started to realize I don't think that's what we were talking about when we said zero tolerance. So I really think that council needs to take a deep view into, what we consider zero tolerance. And although I appreciate the fact that we know that we're going to have these events and we're not going to be able to police our departments like that, I think that our policy has to be written so it's consistent on what we anticipate, what we expect. If it doesn't go off the ground, this is just my own opinion. If it doesn't go off the ground, it's not worth your time, because like I said, I could go down to 120th and Colorado Boulevard and purchase those. I'd be really interested in seeing, because now that I have 2 years under my belt with this policy, I'd be really interested to see, to relook at Thornton's policy. But I think that it's really important that we as a council take the emotions away from what, because we were all I feel that we were all very wound up with the emotions of it from the complaints that we were getting, from the people in the community who have a right to complain, but we may have taken it just a little too far. I think $1,000 fine is a lot for sparklers and little cherry thingies, cherry bombs or whatever. So I actually had talked to Heather about this item after the 4th of July, because I really felt like we needed to look at it again and see what our expectations really are of our police department. I had, just to be real honest, Ron, I had somebody tell me that when they were getting their ticket, the officer had said, listen, you need to contact your city council because we don't want to be doing this. They're making us. Now, that was how many months ago, and I'm sure that I'm screwing it up, not word for word, but that was the gist of the message. And I don't want that to be the message either. I don't want the residents to think, we're the big bad guys and we're making you go after everything. And that's why I think that we need to look at the policy as a whole again and determine what's right for the entire community.
Well,
Uh,
Becky, I can tell you that wasn't the direction of the officers. They knew that direction of zero tolerance came from the chief and the commanders. So if they said, one thing, if they were asked about that, how they get that change, they said, city council does the ordinances and, changes the ordinances. So if you want to change the ordinance, you need to go to council. So again, I know, words and everything else get maybe mixed up on the street, but that was the direction the officers had on the, going out that day. And that's a direction we try to reinforce every year. So we don't put council out there saying, oh yeah, go call your council member. That's not the right way to handle it. The other thing when it comes to the sparklers and the smoke bombs, there's probably more to that story because they're not illegal, right? So my officer's not gonna issue a summons for a smoke bomb and sparklers. That was another thing that was discussed, and they had that ordinance. So again, it's, sometimes, they might have taken this, if it was grouped, sparklers were grouped in a big pile of fireworks, and they confiscated those fireworks, and they were there. That's probably what happened. One good thing is we have body cam footage of a lot of those complaints. So when council gets those complaints and they're making those statements, give us a call, because what our officers do out there is they record what they seized or what they saw during that event, and we have it on record. That's one thing about the body cameras that have been absolutely excellent.
And I totally understand that. The difference is that I was there, and so it becomes, this is what I saw happen. And I know the officer who, gave the ticket, and I know her very well. And it was the zero tolerance. So that's why I'm saying that I have as much responsibility as a city council person, because maybe we went too hard. Maybe we went, this is my thing. I think that we went too harsh. I think that we didn't set the right expectation because we didn't understand it 2 years ago. All what we knew is that it had been crazy for a couple 4th of Julys, and we wanted to help that stop. And I think that in our quest to make that stop, we probably made the situation worse for you in some cases. So my suggestion was that I wanted to relook at the policy, clarify it, and it goes down to, I forget who was saying about, it might have been the last council person, who I'm going to call Shannon because I love her. It may come down to what she had mentioned, that there isn't, there could be, or it might have even been Meredith, sorry. There could be thoughts that you're treating me differently than you're treating Julie, or than you're treating Ashley, right? So I really think that we owe you a revision on the policy to go from this, from a starting point. That's just, my opinion, but after this 4th of July, I'm really willing to have a conversation about clarifying the policy. Because although, you can say that they'll all be at the park next year, some of them have really enjoyed their firework displays at home and their shotguns and all of that. I know that some people will be there, most of us will be there, but you're still going to have your outliers.
Thank you, Councilmember Brown. It looks like Corey would like to chime in.
I guess this is somewhat from a prosecutorial perspective, after having talked to the prosecutor over the past couple years in terms of prosecuting these. I think a lot of this depends ultimately on what council's end game is. And what I mean by that is, a couple years ago, it wasn't just fireworks that left the ground. It was the noise associated with fireworks. It was, from what I heard, it was the impact on our veterans. It was the impact on folks with pets. It was a whole host of factors that frankly aren't just the ones that you buy in Wyoming, but the ones you buy in the next city over, or in the unincorporated areas. And at least from where I sit with the mandatory fines, the question, I think, for you all is whether this is reaching your constituents as to the nature of it being zero tolerance after 2 years of $1,000 fines. From what I understand from the prosecutor, it is, because people know when they come in that they got caught under Northglenn's zero tolerance policy. And so I think ultimately it's for you to determine, number one, what the end game is, what the problem is you're seeking to solve with sort of the zero tolerance. And then number two, if you don't have that type of policy moving forward, what are the potential impacts on the problem you were originally trying to solve? And I think only you know that from your constituents and from the problem you're trying to solve.
All right, more voices. Let's see, Councilmember Goff.
Thank you. I have a couple of things. I think that our policy for fireworks was motivated by lots of citizen complaints. And I think, whatever we decide to do this year, that isn't going to affect the number of calls you're going to get about this. But I do hear that there'll be probably less citations just because you don't have enough police officers out to do that. And I think, as the mayor said, I think we can accept that, knowing the situation. I would really like to see our current policy ordinance in place for this year, because this coming year, 2022, because that's going to be maybe our first normal year since the ordinance was passed. So I would really like to see what happens. The word has gotten out there. I don't know if you guys have statistics, but I would, I think I've seen them. Very few people are repeat offenders. It seems to me, from what I remember, I don't remember the exact numbers, but I don't know, maybe one. And so I do think that this is one of those things that might take a little bit of time to filter through the community and people really to see that they're serious. If I want to do this, I got to go somewhere else, or I just shouldn't be doing it. So I'm not in favor of making any kind of change except, somewhat in our expectations because of the staffing issues.
Thank you.
Councilmember Wickowicz?
Thanks, Mayor. I agree completely with you, Councilmember Goff. We've had this policy in place for some weird years, and so it would be really helpful to see what happens. I think I've only lived here about 7 years, but it's been crazy every single year that I've been here, and it starts in June. So I'm 100% for the zero tolerance January 1 up until January 4, or even farther. I was thinking, possibly allowing the discretion, but then I agree with you, Mayor. The perception could end up being an issue. So yeah, hopefully, we'll have fewer people setting them off because you'll be able to go to different fireworks displays. I imagine those 79 people, hopefully they won't be shooting them off. And I think Corey's right. The issue is our vets and our pets, and we're going to hear about it no matter what. So I agree with you, Councilmember Goff. We've just got to let it kind of run its course for a few years and then make some decisions about changing it. But for now, yeah, I agree. We just have to maybe lower our expectations for the amount of citations we're going to see, but I think it needs to stay as is.
So more than 5,
Yes, ma'am.
less than 70. Mayor Pro Tem Wolford.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Okay, I have a couple of questions and shoot. Okay, Commander Osgood, you're probably not going to have all the answers to these tonight, and that's okay. From last year, I thought we had some more data that was kind of like separated out a little more so that it could tell like the full story and picture. And so that's where I'm coming from when I ask these questions, like just trying to fully understand the picture. So one is, I was curious about the breakdown by ward, and if you all identified any new hotspots that maybe you hadn't seen before, or if it was consistent. So I'll just pause and see if you have anything to share, and then I have a couple other questions.
Right now, ma'am, I don't have that information, but we can collect that for you.
Okay, cool. And for any of these that you don't have questions or don't have answers for, we can follow up later. The other thing I was curious about was, do we have any data on how many of the summons actually resulted in fines once they went in front of the judge?
I don't have that data immediately. I know some of them are actually still going to court, so we should be able to get that data fairly soon.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'd be really interested in seeing how those numbers compare to last year's number. And that we were again getting a full picture. And then did you all capture any of the race data for tickets?
We actually have that available. I didn't bring it with me. I actually had
Okay.
our crime analyst look into that, and it looked pretty,
Okay.
from the numbers, I can't say exactly, but it's pretty even with what our demographics are.
Okay. All right. And then I guess the last question I was curious about were, and I know Councilmember Goff mentioned this, but I'd be really interested to know how many repeat ticket recipients there were from last year. Are we seeing folks climbing that, you know, the ladder per se? I don't know any other way to say it. You know, who are graduating to receiving a higher level ticket or a more expensive ticket because they're continuing to offend.
Yes, ma'am, that's something else I can look, I don't have the exact numbers, but from just basic, I don't think we've had many repeat offenders, if any, but we'll look into that also.
Okay. Okay, great. I appreciate that. And then as far as, you know, where we are in the ordinance, I'm in favor of leaving it where it is and you know, kind of shifting our expectation around, you know, the 5 to 76 for the next year. I think I'm a little worried that that people are just going to be confused, right? Like, so for the last 2 years, we've had this zero tolerance policy, but next year we're going to have discretion. So you might not get a ticket. So are you really going to risk it? Like, I think that we're not sending a clear message if we kind of go back and forth. And so I'm in favor of keeping it for the next year. And that way we've got kind of 3 good, or at least 3 years of data to take a look at. And we can decide if this is, you know, truly moving the needle or if it's not. I fully recognize that, you know, outside of this ordinance, we're going to continue to have folks shooting off fireworks. And I think unfortunately that's the reality. But I am interested in seeing what y'all are able to accomplish next year with this policy. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Duran Mullica.
Awesome, thank you. So, first quick question. So when you guys are showing that agency comparisons table, is that all July 4th data, or is that a window of the weekend?
That's July 4th, ma'am.
July 4th.
Yes,
So,
ma'am.
okay, all cities comparable by the same day. Okay.
Yes.
So that helps me just put that into the context. So one of the things that really just honestly, it breaks my heart about the agency comparisons. To me personally, I feel like this is a clear, very big red flag that Northglenn is an outlier. Very huge, as in we are over policing this issue. That is my personal opinion of this. I voiced this last year and I know I'm in the minority and that's okay. I feel like we need to relook at our policy. I think we need to relook at how we are addressing this issue because it is very, very clear by this table we are doing something that no other city around us is doing. I understand what the problem we were trying to solve, right? That and Corey's question, I think, really kind of honed us down to like, where is it that we want to be? I think we went too far. I think that this data shows us that we went too far. We went too far. We have the most citations in the entire region. Like, that's impressive. And honestly, I do want to say thank you, Commander-in-Chief, because you did exactly what this council told you to do last year. And so I want to make that perfectly clear. You know, there was the consensus to have a zero tolerance policy continued last year, and you guys and you did your job. So this has nothing to do with our police officers and how they're performing. It's based off of the direction of council. So I completely understand that. And thank you for all of your hard work and all of those difficult conversations that you had to have while people were celebrating the 4th of July. So I understand we have, you know, we're concerned about vets and pets. But what about the families that reside in our community? People who have, for generations, set off fireworks, even if they're small ones. I understand there's people who go way overboard. I hear them in my neighborhood, And this policy has not impacted them or their behavior at all since this has been in place. So is our policy even being effective? Or are we really just catching more and more people over time? I don't know. I think that that's something we also need to consider. So I think we need to relook at things. I think we need to relook at our policy. I think we need to relook at expectations. Because what we're doing, to me, we're an outlier city. We're not meeting, I think, the needs of the entirety of our residents. I agree that there's some people who go overboard. Let's focus on them. And how do we not punish families who want to have some type of firework experience that, you know, our policy obviously outlaws. So I think that's my personal opinion in all of this matter. You know, I'm really looking forward to a Northglenn event this year. I think a lot of people were upset that we didn't have fireworks in our park. And so I'm really excited about what that event looks like. You know, that's my take on it. So, thank you.
So I did a point of clarification. So when we look at the comparison data by agency, how many of those cities had fireworks shows? Because I know Westminster did. I know Brighton did. Did Thornton have their show?
Yes, ma'am. They did have their shows that year.
Okay.
But I know the previous years, a lot of them didn't, so you can
Absolutely.
look at that.
I was just,
That
when I
data.
look at response, I know part of it is because we didn't have our show, but the rest of them did. So their deployment strategy was probably different and could be why those numbers are so skewed. I think to the point of looking, I know we struggle just as much with Thornton residents as we do Northglenn residents as far as sound and noise complaints. When people call in, you can't tell sometimes where that came from. And if you're on any amount of bordering, you don't know if it was a Thornton resident or a Northglenn resident. And I just wonder if we've ever considered having a regional discussion about this, like, or at least our neighbors.
Yes, ma'am, we have. We actually, almost every year we do.
And how does that go?
Especially with Thornton. I asked them, you know, what they're, especially with the traffic and things like that. And this data we drew out last year, we also reached out to them to see what their data was on what their enforcement activities were.
Okay.
And some of them responded, well, what are yours? So we gave them our information back also.
Okay.
So I think, you know, I really appreciate those comments. We do try to do exactly to the best of our ability what we're asked of by our council because they represent our community. And those are all questions that you as a council will have to decide how we're going to do that. Just one caveat, yeah, maybe we are over policing or maybe the other agencies are under policing this issue. It's just something to think about.
And I wonder, is there a place for a different type of regional conversation? So you guys are sharing, like we're doing this, you're doing that, these are our numbers, these are your numbers. Is there a type of, similar to the fact that we're trying to come together and have a conversation about all the racing? Like that's a community issue that crosses boundaries. Is this an issue that we could come together and say, hey, how about if we enforce this similarly and maybe help each other out?
Back to the chief's meetings are a good place to start that conversation, in my opinion, but I'll let him answer that.
And again, just like in this room, there's difference of opinion on how they're going to enforce. I could tell you it was a region, I think last year was excellent with Westminster and, you know, some of the partnerships there. The Thornton partnership that Ron was talking about, after they started sending cars down our bike paths into our neighborhoods, we had those conversations, so that's no longer done. The streets and sending traffic and everything else, there has to be a conversation on traffic flow, because if they're sending vehicles in, so we do with Thornton quite a bit, you know, talk with them on some of the, on how we, on their enforcement, that is totally up to their chiefs, and I can bring it up. But a lot of them are, you know, 4th of July, I mean, you saw the numbers, it's like, hands off and, and again, in our department as officers with Thornton and Westminster, we have maybe the third of the number of officers that they have. Yeah.
Oh, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, so, and then our numbers are still, we enforced the heck out of it.
Okay.
So, but we can have those conversations.
So I know,
Mayor, can I
Yeah.
interject real quickly? I mean,
Absolutely.
certainly Chief can bring it up with his Chiefs Network. I think another outlet would be the Metro Mayor's Caucus, because really, you're the governing body that's provided direction to us, and I don't think other communities, other governing bodies have had the same level of discussion about enforcement. So, council approved the ordinance in fall of 2019 after we had done the research of here's an approach enforcement-wise and really putting teeth behind the mandatory minimum fine. Could other communities get on board? They potentially could. So I think having Chief bring it up, but also perhaps you sharing it with, which I think you have to a degree, based on conversations last year, really seeing what interest exists with other elected governing bodies to do something more on this front.
well, and I wonder too, I mean, we were left with a review of the department's approach, and then you started throwing out some pretty interesting, innovative ideas. Like I looked in the memo, $8,000 in overtime is a specific cost, but it's also the wear and tear of our people, right? And what that did to staff and morale and all of that. So there's the $8,000 plus. Is hiring some help for the park, does that make sense? It's probably more cost effective, and it might give relief in a variety of ways. That doesn't mean that then we say, okay, now we're gonna double that. That's not the message. I'm really interested in hearing all the different ideas you have on how to staff the 4th of July the best we can.
Yeah, we'll look at a lot of different things. I'll talk with the city manager and we'll bring something back to council.
Okay. Councilmember Lukeman Hiramasa, I see your hand.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll just keep it quick because that's actually my point, was just trying to circle back to your initial statement, which about the wear and tear and possibly bringing in security, and I don't think we had addressed that. So I didn't know if that was something that was still needed to be discussed amongst yourselves, but also I'm just a little worried. I understand, changing policies can open up to all kinds of issues, but I'm also just thinking, like, we are 9 people that can lower our expectations, but, the community isn't going to lower their expectations. So that balance too, I'm just a little bit concerned about as well, and how that's going to play out. So I just want to throw that out there.
Oh, the phone will ring a lot.
Will ring.
A lot.
And
The
I'm just
phone
worried
will
that
ring.
they'll pay the price for that in terms of, well, we have this ordinance and our police department is not enforcing it, because I already hear that in some of the other things. So I just know there'll be something.
Corey, can you speak
Thank
to
you.
how the state law matches our ordinance?
Well, different communities have authority to deviate as it relates to essentially fireworks that don't leave the ground. And so those are the fireworks that are sold at fireworks stands in other communities. It's illegal statewide to have fireworks essentially that leave the ground. So those are typically the ones that you would cross state lines to buy and bring back. And so local governments have the authority to regulate the ones that don't leave the ground, which are the ones that are defined in our ordinance.
I've heard a couple words, right? We have the ordinance and we have policy, which I think we're just using them interchangeably tonight. But is there a way to keep the ordinance where it is, but have an internal enforcement decree, if it comes from chief and commanders down, that we only do the ones that leave the ground?
That would be really difficult.
I mean, but that's the definition of discretion. So if they're asking for discretion, could that be the line that's drawn? Because what I'm afraid of is I like you, or you're my neighbor, or you're my friend, or you're a city employee, or you're somebody I know, so I'm gonna let you off the hook, Is that the line that could be the discretion line?
Well, and I go back to what's the end game, because the ones that don't leave the ground are just as loud.
I know. I don't like them.
And have a lot of the negative impacts that council was trying to address with the original firework ordinance. If the issue is those that leave the ground, then you could frankly repeal the ordinance and go back to just going under state law as part of your ordinance. And so again, it depends on what I think the end game is in terms of how, not only what council wants to regulate, but how. If you have a bunch of families that get together on a street, buy a couple $100 worth of fireworks that don't leave the ground, the impact on the neighborhood could be just as bad.
And I totally agree with you, and I respectfully disagree with Councilmember Duran Malika, because I think that even if a family has always done it and they love it and it's fun, it's still breaking the law. So if, like, people like to speed and do drag racing too, but it's still breaking the law, like, I feel like we have to enforce the law as much as we possibly can without completely burning out our team.
The other thing about our ordinance too, I just want to make you guys aware of, we did talk with the fire department. And again, they were really happy with the ordinance that you put forward. Again, because that's a big problem for them, fires, injuries, everything else. So just like it's our busiest night of the year, it's also their busiest night of the year. So we made sure that they were involved in that process of looking at it and saying, yeah, we're happy about the Northglenn ordinance.
And I guess if I were gonna recommend trying to find that sweet spot on enforcement, it would be size and scope as opposed to leaving the ground. And even that's gonna be really difficult from a discretion perspective, but the police do that. And if that was the direction of council, if you have, and I'm just trying to go at the end of the spectrum, if you will, if you have someone with their child and they're, just doing a very small single firework versus the entire neighborhood out in the street with everyone bringing their own, bring your own legal fireworks, there is a difference in size and scope. Still difficult, and I think from listening to the prosecutor and what she has dealt with over the past 2 years, the one thing that has happened from the zero tolerance is that when people get caught, they know. They know what the penalty is. They know they got caught. And so from a enforcement perspective, from listening to the prosecutor speak, that is a tool that is invaluable because it does spread through the community. Whether popular or not, there is knowledge in the community about the council's policy.
I don't know where we landed. Councilmember Duran Malika?
Yeah, I think I just wanted to clarify. So yes, we do need to support the law, but we are the ones who establish the policy. I mean, yes, it's against the law because we said it is. So, I mean, it's just important to have that in context. Like, we could change that if we want. We as a council decide what our policy is going to be on enforcement. And so, I think that, I don't know, I think that we do need to find, I don't know if there is a sweet spot, but if there is one, let's try and find it. Because I think our current approach, although it is honorable, I definitely agree with the honor behind the intention of the policy and the work that we're trying to do. I also do feel like, maybe we're being stubborn just to be stubborn, instead of finding policy that works for community. That's my, thanks.
All right, you just called me stubborn.
I'm stubborn.
Nice.
Hey, I am very stubborn.
I don't know that I'm being stubborn so much as I'm being responsive to the citizen request. So I'm wondering if, like, in the spring, because we have some lead time, I mean, we know we have fireworks starting in January, but would it be helpful to have some sort of community forum? Or we haven't done a town hall in a while, but is in order to truly get because we do have residents that are like, hey, I love fireworks, leave us alone. But we have a lot of residents that this is disrupting their quality of life during the month of July. And so I think if we're gonna make this change, or if we're gonna discuss, I don't propose a change, but if we're hearing a proposal for a change, I think we should have a conversation where we actually engage residents before we do that.
Sure.
So. I got a thumbs up from Mayor Pro Tem over there. Okay, so let's talk about that later.
So I'm hearing that you would like to do some type of public engagement in the spring. So we'll come back to you first part of next year, leading into what that public engagement will look like.
Great, love it. Thank you. Thank you both. Commander, that was well done.
Thank you.
I appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you.
All right, our study session is adjourned. We're gonna take a little bathroom break.
Yes.
And then we will have, oh wait, do I need to, sorry. No, I adjourned this one. So I will call to order the special one later.